Hello everyone, welcome to Redbus TS channel. In this video, we'll look at the DHS final rule that was published yesterday, where now they require end clients to file H1B petition if they're in a third-party worksite kind of a placement situation. What we'll cover in this video is a background, what the final rule is, and effective date and other aspects. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, do subscribe to our channel for getting regular updates. So firstly, let's quickly look at the background. If you recall, back in October of 2020 last year, DHS issued an interim final rule that had a host of things, and they were categorized as a strengthened H1B program. And some of the things that were part of that were, changing the definition of H1B specialty occupation, and the requirements for that, in terms of what contracts that need to be submitted. Also, changes related to what constitutes an employer and employee relationship, and requirements around that, eliminating itinerary requirements, having 1-year H1Bs for third-party placements, additional rules for verification and site visits. And I mean, all of these were part of that big program that was, tagged under something called a Strengthen H1B program. What happened since it was published was it was taken to court because there are a lot of things in that were practically very much impossible for all these large organizations to comply with, and eventually courts cancelled that on December 1st. A California court cancelled that rule, so the interim final rule was technically cancelled. And the reason for cancellation was that USCIS did not follow proper process of notice and comment period. That's the reason that it was cancelled. And eventually, yesterday, January 15th, or actually, on Friday, January 15th, DHS again is basically took a small part of that interim final rule, and that is related to the definition of US employer and everything, and employer-employer relationship parts, and it is publishing that as a final rule. And DHS says that they want to publish this as a final rule. Because they want to protect US workers, and they've received comments in October 2020. So this is the brief background and DHS stance and why they're actually publishing this as a final rule and the need for it. Now, to set everybody on the, to make sure everybody on the same page, so this is a typical scenario what works in consulting areas. You have a primary H1B employer, the person who actually hires you and, interviews and, basically sponsors your H1B and who runs your payroll. What this company does is, they actually can take the H1B worker and then place them at an end client or secondary employer, So these terms are used interchangeably, end client or a secondary employer. So these are the end clients or the secondary employees where H1B worker will be working, and H1B worker is basically categorized as working at a third-party worksite placement, and this is usually indicated in the LCA regarding the status. So this is the whole context of the the entire scenario, and the entire final rule is related around these, where the relationship between the H1B worker and the end client, or how this all will play out. That's the reason I'm putting this so that you all are on the same page. Now, in terms of what they have actually done is they're actually changing the definition of US employer, and they're adding a new interpretation of employer-employer relationship. So in terms of what the definition is changing is that, so the current definition of US employer in the regulation has clauses like, hire, pay, fire, supervise, or otherwise control the work of any such employee. Now they're removing that and adding a host of new things under a new paragraph called employer-employer relationship. I will look at that in a second. And the DHS says that they will use the conventional master-servant relationship consistent with the common law. So this is the broad statement that they use, and what that means is, and they say that they will assess the entire situation or the scenario by weighing in all the factors, not just one or two factors. So that's what they say, and for that they give reference to something called this one of the big nationwide mutual insurance co-and this is one of the big lawsuits. It's a labor lawsuit that was filed, and it was adjudicated by Supreme Court. So they refer to this case and how the definition of employer-employer relationship exists. So we'll quickly look at that. So what is this common law test for an employee, right? So as per that, common law test for determining who qualifies as an employer is somebody who can hire, who has right to control, who gives all the instruments and tools basically at the location of work, who has a right to assign, all of these things, right, that are typically, done by an employer, right? And also other things are who actually does hiring parts, or and also so there it says that it's a non-exhaustive list of criteria for identifying a master servant relationship, and this is actually termed as a common law employee in various and they say that there is no shorthand formula, and they don't just look at one. So if you look at the same situation, if you look at a consulting companies as well, there are a good amount of these that are actually done by the employer, the client company. So they have the right to control. They actually provide all the instruments. They provide the projects. So they actually they do the regular hiring. So all of these, it makes that they're actually employer-employer relationship exists. And now this is actually very, very important, because this changes the fundamental interpretation of other aspects. So now, because of that conventional master servant relationship, they will basically say that a lot of other aspects will also be assessed. So these are the bunch of factors like a right to control. I mean, whatever you see there in that Supreme Court judgment are more or less taken and actually put them as a list of requirements for assessing employer employment relationship. So this is the big change, and this is actually the text in the regulatory document. What you see on the screen. You can read that. I'm not going to go into the details, but the gist of this is it actually has another impact because of the interpretation change. Now it actually implies, or it's impacted by another existing DHS regulation. As per that existing DHS regulation, what it does is if an H-1B worker performs any non-agricultural work or services from more than one employer, then they need to file separate H-1B. So this is a standard law that exists today. This is where you see people filing concurrent H-1B kinds of things as well, where if you work for multiple employers, they need to have a separate H-1B petition for that. So this is an existing rule. It is nothing new actually. And with the new interpretation of employer-employer relationship and the common law test, so the end client is also technically categorized as an employee, and that's where they also have to file H-1B petition, separate H-1B petition. So this is how they are actually. So in fact, the interpretation changes the entire the way the whole system works now. And what you see on the screen is the regulation text. And if you see the third party, they say that the third party entity will also be considered as an employer of the H-1B worker under the common law test adopted in this rule. And the third party entity would also be required to file a petition for the H-1B worker. So that's why it's very, very important, that because of this interpretation, now the third party entity, which is nothing but the end client, they, who have to file is a new separate H-1B petition for the H-1B worker. So that's the biggest change, And now what happens is, when is this effective, right? So the effective date, it's not yet published in Federal Register yet. So it could be very likely published, backdated 15th, or it could be published on Monday, 18th. And the implementation date, they said it's going to be 180 days from the date of publication. So it could very likely be July 14th or 16th, either of these days. And who all does it apply to, right? It applies to anybody who has third-party placement situations and will file after the final implementation date, which is after July 14th or July 16th of 2021. And it includes all new H-1B filings, amendments, extensions, and transfers. So there's no restriction. It applies to everybody. And so it's very, very important that all of these things are taken care, right? As you can see on the screenshot, this is actually regulatory text. This will only apply to petitions filed on or after effective date, and it does not apply to new regulation, or does not apply to any pending petitions or previously approved. So if you already have it approved, it doesn't impact you. That's very, very important to note. So the impact of this is going to be pretty big, right? So the impact is, it's going to impact all the third-party placement situations, and it's going to be impacting all big and small IT firms. There are large MNCs that are in this situation, and there are small companies that do this as well. All the business consulting firms, also doctors who are placed in this, third-party work sites at the hospitals or any other places, right? So they're also impacted. So just to give you a perspective, so this is a screenshot. This is a report from 2019, where it says a list of all the clients clients of for Wipro, or for Infosys, you can see the names of Apple, American Express, all of these big names, right? Banks, Mastercard, all of these, HP. You name it. All these large companies that you see, are actually going to be under this, because they will also now have to file the H1B petition. So this is going to be a big pushback from everybody, including the IT services companies and also these companies. So there will be definitely a lot of lawsuits. So we expect that there will be many lawsuits, or collectively they may file a couple of lawsuits. In some of the areas they may look at are the interpretation of this without the proper comment period, and the regulation is not actually backed by Congress, right? So this is all subject to what DHS is interpreting from that, and so the rule existed for a long time, and this is something new. They're just changing, and they also avoided good cause used a good cause exception for publish this as a final rule, and the impact for small businesses. Also, they skipped the OMB review, basically, which is important for anything that's over $100 million economy impact, right? And there is no economic impact analysis done to this. Yeah. So these are all some of the areas that they could actually consider for the lawsuit. Now, in terms of Biden administration, what they can do is, because the effective date is 60 days from the publication, they can technically put this on hold and delay it, and they may review it later and may not make it effective. So that's one option they can do. Second option is, if this is taken to court, they choose not to fight and they can just let it slide, right? So and they could come to an agreement there. So that's second option. And they may also need to file another regulation if they want to remove it, if at all they don't do either of these things. So it's going to be interesting how they'll handle this. So this is actually a very big one. And apart from this, based on this, there is another DOL guidance that was given. So we'll cover that in a separate video. You can check that out. We'll publish it hopefully today or tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Do subscribe for getting regular updates.